it's like holding a giant mirror up that sees through you and all of your subconscious behaviours and the behaviours that you formed over time as a response to trauma, and allows you to unravel them, face them and resolve them, and you go out into the world a better person. And if we all can go out into the world as a better person, our collective consciousness is a culmination of our individual consciousness. So all of us are doing that work on ourselves and resolving our trauma, which is where all of our negative, again using that word, but all of our more negative interactions stem from. Then we create a better world.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. Thanks for making it happen, inviting me down. I think it's the first time I've actually sat in a chair doing a podcast, so I might cross my legs.
Really? How do you normally sit?
On the floor.
I should spend more time on the floor.
There you go.
I do a lot of my calls walking.
Okay.
And even do meetings where possible running. Like if it's someone that I can go for a run with, do the meeting while on the move. I like that. Try and spend as little time possible sat in a chair.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? Because that it's just so easy to allow the chair to consume us. Everything happens in this position. You know, it's like traveling. A lot of people spend a lot of time traveling, but then it's going to the couch for rest. It's going to eat on a chair. It's going to the bed, which is above the floor. It's it's all the above, really. We don't have that relationship with the ground.
It's true.
And,
very true.
And then when you go to a yoga class, you end up getting injured, and you're like, oh God, what were these people doing that set up a sequence like this, or they had a relationship with the ground?
For sure. And I've tried to integrate that at home. I've got a bit like a standing desk, earthing mat. Try and work standing up where possible, eat standing up where possible, or in a squat, or sat down on the floor where possible. But you're right. I mean, socially, we've evolved in a culture that people it's entirely normal to sit for 8-10 hours a day and then lay down for another 8-9, maybe less hours a day when you're in bed. So very much leaning towards this sedentary lifestyle where we're designed, I believe, to be walking around, sitting on the floor, running, climbing, whatever. I think that's reflected in what is obviously a health epidemic at the moment. You see it in the UK and the US, in Western cultures, which is considered to be the most evolved, at least technologically, socially, supposedly, and yet there's these incredible rates of obesity and poor mental health and a whole host of other problems which stem from partly these kind of lifestyle choices which have become commonplace and normal.
Absolutely. And financially, you'd say the West are, per capita better off, and then what are we spending our money on? Probably things that aren't aligning with, like, allowing us to thrive, or like going into that. But it's an interesting one, and I think on that, it's not just sitting down. It's what the chair does is it just allows you to stay in one position for longer. So if you're conscious and you're aware of it, it's not demonizing chairs. It's never the chair, but it's us in it. So if we're doing different things, like now I'm cross-legged, or I might move, and it's just changing things up, I suppose. Just breaking those patterns and just being more aware.
It's a good analogy for many things. It's never the chair, it's the way that it's the intention behind how it's used, right? Yeah. Same as I have this conversation about social media a lot. It's like, it's not that social media is bad. In actual fact, if it's used in the right way, it's incredible. If you had a niche interest 30 years ago, super niche, and you lived in a small village somewhere, very difficult to relate to people that shared that same interest and have kind of community around that interest. Whereas now, because of social media, we're able to find other groups of people that care about the same things that we care about and form community with them, albeit online. However, that being said, if it's used with not necessarily nothing, there's a wrong intention, but let's say something that's potentially, emotionally charged in the wrong way, comparison to other people or whatever it might be, then it can be negative. But it's not the social media's negative, it's the intention and the use and the consciousness behind the person that's using it. one of the, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a hack, but I did a bit of like a social media, Instagram in particular, like audit recently, where I looked for, what's coming up in my timeline? Who am I following? And just basically clearing out anything that doesn't resonate with where I'm trying to go or who I am or what I want to be. And now when I go on, if I do get caught scrolling, which invariably we all do sometimes, right? You know, we can't blame our ancient piece of kit up here that's now being optimized against this mega computer. But to go, if I am going to be caught scrolling, at least somebody caught scrolling through stuff that's uplifting, that's positive, that's educational, that's inspiring. And there is a whole host of that kind of content online if you look in the right place.
Yeah, me more so a couple of years ago. I didn't quite get it when people started moaning about Instagram and it's just doing, I mean, the algorithms have certainly changed in the past few years, but a couple of years ago I was like, I leave Instagram after 15 minutes and I'm so charged. I was like, it inspires the hell out of me, or I'm laughing, or I'm having a really impactful time on Instagram. But it has changed, and I think it's, I'm using it more now than I probably ever have done. But yeah, it's you can use it and not let it use you. It's a tool. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. And it's something we're all aware of. We all talk about it. It's always there. But it's more important just to bring your awareness to it. And I wonder how many people do cull it now and again. Like, you're listening. Is that something you're doing?
Well, it's first to be conscious of it. Like, you know, to cull it means that you need to be aware of whether it's having a positive or negative impact. For many, they don't even get to that point to have the initial awareness whether it is good or bad. You know, so it's that initial awareness that, okay, hang on, step back. What is this doing to me? Is this is this overly positive? Is it overly negative? Why am I using it? That level of self-inquiry, I don't think is encouraged, and it certainly isn't prevalent in our culture, to be aware of oneself to that degree, to know whether it's good or bad for you. And it's something that is, I believe, fundamental to having a fulfilled or a happy life, is to have an element of self-inquiry, to know who you are, or to discover who you are. It's foundational.
Yeah, I think responsibility as well. That's one thing I've been thinking about lately. Did I feel responsible going into my adolescence? As in, you get your driving license. Does that come with a certain responsibility? Overtly, it does, because you've got you in a vehicle that can potentially kill someone. So it's, you need some responsibility. But I never felt that when I got given my driving license. It was just like, I get this now. I get to have this.
It's like a Western rites of passage.
It is.
With all
really
of these, I guess, if you look to indigenous cultures across the world, they have these rites of passage at various points in their adolescence or adulthood as a way to step into that new phase of life. I mean, we have, on your 18th birthday, it's culturally sanctioned to go out and get super drunk, right? It's 17, you get if you pass at 17, you get a drive. I passed 5th time on my driving test, so I didn't get one automatically, but you invariably, at some point, you're more likely to pass a driving test, some sooner than others. But in terms of responsibility, I think a lot of my suffering came from the inability to take full responsibility. I listened to a really good podcast with Tom Bilyeu recently, and he was talking about radical accountability. And I think I'm quite radical in my accountability. Like, something goes wrong in one of my companies, it's always my fault. It doesn't matter if it's someone in a restaurant 200 miles away that's working front of house that drops something on someone, it's my fault. It's always my fault. And if you have that perspective, things become a lot easier. But he took it to another level, and he said, if my wife's driving a car and it gets hit by an asteroid, it's my fault. And they go, what? Well, I know there's this charity that does this work where they look for potential asteroids. I know it exists, but I've never donated, so it's my fault. That you'll always be able to find a way that it's your fault. And it's not that, it seems quite extreme, but I think when you take a degree of responsibility for everything that happens in your life, it's liberating. And I tend to find people that are not where they want to be, or suffering a little bit more, is where the responsibility is always shifted. I'm not here because of this. This didn't happen to me because that happened. This person did this to me. It's never, what was my role in that? And it's really hard to do, right? Whenever anything goes, we're happy to take the credit when things go right. Some of us. We're reluctant to take responsibility most of the time when things go wrong. But if we can take responsibility when anything happens to us, it's then super liberating. Super liberating.
Yeah, and I think when you do feel like, oh, it's my fault, or it is how you use that as a tool, as a perspective shifter. Yes, it's my fault. And if you're going to dwell on that, lots of shame comes with that. And shame is riddled and skewed in so many different areas of our lives, because we're not really taught what it is, or why there's loads of shame attached to something. Maybe you're bullied at school and you're feeling shameful because it's on you, but it's never on you as a kid. Like, you haven't done anything to deserve that. But in this, the shame could be attached to, okay, it's my fault. And if it comes with that judgment of yourself that you could have done more, or you can get into a real pit, of.
Yeah, I think it's certainly the next level of that. So after you take responsibility, it's not that. I mean, personally, how I look at it is, something. Let's say, I use the business example because it's an easy one. Something happens in one of the restaurants. Someone has a bad experience, something to do with the food, whatever it might be. I take responsibility, but I'm not ashamed. Me taking responsibility, that's feedback. It highlights something that can be improved, not something that necessarily is that I've done wrong in the context of how I feel about myself. It's highlighted something that I can improve. So it's all perspective, right? It's all the lens that we look at the world through. Is it the lens that says, okay, this is amazing, this has highlighted something which I can improve, which makes the customer experience better, and because I believe so passionately about what we do and the impact it can have, I want the customer experience to be the best it can be, so that message is delivered, and therefore this is a way to make it better? Or is it through the lens of, I really tried, I'm not good enough, I didn't do this? They're two different lenses, but the feedback's the same. It's just a perspective and how we look at it. So I think it's easy for shame to creep in if you take the stance of, this is my fault, and then but in a negative way, as opposed to 100% my fault, but great, I've got something that I can go and work on. And it's the same way that we look at, when things that we deem instantly as negative, context is everything. You never have context in the immediate moment to determine whether it is negative or positive. Some of the worst things that happened to me, that I thought were the worst things at the time, have turned out later to be the things that I needed to happen to move into the area that I wanted to be. But let's say something negative happens, or something challenging comes up. It's like, this challenge, this is going to give me what I need on the other side. Let me find a way to navigate through this, not reacting straight away, sitting with it. Okay, this challenge has come up. This challenge has come up to help me to grow, and it's going to highlight the areas I need to grow to become the person I need to be that goes where I want to go, as opposed to, why is this happening to me? Why has this happened? And you judge it as immediately bad. And it may seem bad at first, but that's why you need that moment of, and that's where your tools and your techniques come in, whether that's breathing, whether that's whatever it might be, whether it's journaling, whatever it might be for you. And that's why these tools are so valuable, because anyone can practice the tools when things are going well, but the tools are there for when they are there as a preventative measure, but they're also there when things do become really difficult. It's easy to meditate when you're feeling really happy and fulfilled. It's quite difficult at times to use meditation when you're stressed, you're anxious, it all feels on top of you, but that's when you really need it the most.
Yeah, and I think we get into deep water when we start to label the bad, the good. We've got to then take a look at like the human existence, and these words that we throw around and label things, they come with so much weight, and all of the memories that are associated with those words, labeling good or bad. It's one thing I've tried to break out of doing, actually.
Language is so restrictive and so primitive, Good. You can have 1,000 different scenarios that are all very different, but labeling them all as good, it's very limiting. It's very difficult to communicate what you really mean with limited language. And to your point about calling something good or bad, we never have the immediate context, and sometimes we never get context for it. It's not good or bad. It just is.
What practices have you got to bring you back to that? It just is moments.
I think on a daily basis, I think having a morning routine has been really, really helpful to me. Getting up early, meditation, movement, cold, breath, stretching, and consuming something that's positive, podcast, book, whatever. First 2 hours of the day being really that foundation means that I can go out into the world, and yes, I still get triggered. Yes, I still react. Yes, of course. But I notice when I'm much more observant of myself and my own behaviour now, and if it's owing to that. If I go too many days without doing that morning routine, I really notice the change in myself and how I handle things. Morning and evening routine as well. So before bed, just reading.
It's so funny. I haven't heard the evening routine, even though we all have one. But
yeah,
it's not as emphasised, is it?
No, it's not. But I think before you want for me to sleep well, I need to have the phone needs to have been away for a while.
Sure.
I like to read before I go to sleep. Sparks the imagination. I do some breath before I go to sleep, and I meditate before I sleep. I often fall asleep meditating. I find it a lot easier at night, actually, because the body's quite relaxed. And then between that, creating my own kind of rituals and ceremony. So using psychedelics as one. If there's a big problem I need to resolve, or I'm at a point in my life where I need to make a decision, psychedelics have been the best thing I've ever used for that. Just to go by myself, isolate myself, take a pen and pad, take a moderate dose of mushrooms and sit with it and see what comes up. And I've solved some of my biggest problems in that way. I'm not advocating that everyone go out and take psilocybin.
I know you bought some with me to give you as a present, but I didn't. I chose the cacao. I thought I'm travelling to London. I don't need this.
Look, we all know that that we all know that it's not strictly something that we're allowed to have or do, and I'm not going to suggest that I've done this anywhere local to the UK. but no, I think psychedelics has been it literally changed my life. It literally changed my life. But there's other ways to get there. It's not just psychedelics,
Of course.
Journaling or things. There's other ways.
But
it's just what I found.
It's important to mention, and I try and use that opportunity, that way in on a podcast to talk about psychedelics, because there's a big shift happening, whether you're aware of it or not. But it's in the West, there's a big surgence of research and lots of powerful people in great positions.
Definitely.
Doing a lot of good work with it.
I feel obligated to talk about it because it's helped me so much.
Yeah, for sure.
And it seems to me in insanity that you've got a fungi that grows in the earth that damages nobody. It's zero toxicity. Like, you can literally take as many grams of mushrooms as you want. I wouldn't advise going much over 5, to be honest. But you can take as much as you want and it won't kill you.
Yeah.
It's the psychological benefits are well documented, as you say, and further research is ongoing as to the benefits to people with depression, ADHD, PTSD, anxiety, etc. It's made me a better it made me a much nicer person to be around. But the way it does that is, it's like holding a giant mirror up that sees through you and all of your subconscious behaviours and the behaviours that you formed over time as a response to trauma, and allows you to unravel them, face them and resolve them, and you go out into the world a better person. And if we all can go out into the world as a better person, our collective consciousness is a culmination of our individual consciousness. So all of us are doing that work on ourselves and resolving our trauma, which is where all of our negative, again using that word, but all of our more negative interactions stem from. Then we create a better world. And what better way than doing it with something that is free, that grows in the ground, that's accessible, that's incredibly powerful. Obviously we know why, and there's certain structures in place that are presenting this at the moment, but it's good to see that trajectory is now happening. And it can't come soon enough. It really can't. And I'm not saying it's right for everyone. I'm not advocating it for everyone. Yeah. I think we have to find our medicine and find what works for us. I've the first psychedelic I did was ayahuasca. I've used ayahuasca, and it's another level to probably psilocybin, I would say. But I've not done it for 6 years. It's the opposite to addictive. It's like I can't wait to not do it again. Yeah. There's various other psychedelics that we can talk about, but I think and outside of psychedelics, there's traditional therapy works well for people. Hypnosis works well for people.
Yeah, just communication.
But I think there's, we're probably we've got come so far down this road of westernized chemical solutions that have a very low success rate, and now we've got this holistic natural approach sitting here. Well, let's try this for a while. Let's make this more freely available. Naturally, there's not the same profits associated, but maybe there will be. Maybe I don't care.
Or when something grows on shit, then you know you're going to make it illegal because everyone will start finding it. It's interesting. The conspiracies creep in, don't they? But yeah,
it's because they're not conspiracies.
Exactly. I love that response. So, if I was God and I was to put the kind of secrets of the universe in anything, it would be on shit, you know.
100%.
Oh, amazing. But yeah, it's resonated massively when you said you intentionally going solo to create a space to then introspect. That's definitely what I've done. I never really felt a calling to do something in a party mode or in a high stimulated stressful environment. It's always been like, right, I'm going in, I need to be safe.
And I would really advise against that, by the way, as well. Like, you know,
doing it on your own.
No, doing it in a stimulated space.
Oh, sure.
I would say that at this point, again, I hate putting numbers on it because it makes it. It's like, oh, I've done this. It's like the ego shifts and it becomes spiritual egoism. So I'm not saying I've done this many, but I've sat with mushrooms enough to experiment and know, and really, not that anyone understands it fully, but I've now been able to tweak my experience each time to know what works best and what I get the most out of. And any time I've attempted to do it in an environment where it's highly stimulated or there's a lot of people, it's been very difficult to have clarity of thought and to really get anything answer. But equally, it's very triggering. It can trigger anxiety.
Absolutely.
Very easily. You take on other people's energy very easily. So if I'm going to do it in a collective group, it's in a ceremony setting, the space is cleansed, there's sitters, it's orchestrated in such a way that the group can share the experience, but everyone's there for the same reason. Or if I'm going to do it by myself, which I do a lot, is a lot in context, you know, as and when I need to, the best to get the most from is silent darkness by myself, and if I need to write, I'll write. But it has to be, I can't have been on the phone within a few hours before. Diet leading up to it is very important. Clear vessel, a space where I know I won't be interrupted, or to go out into nature by myself in an isolated space and do it by myself there. It depends on what outcome that you want. And then dosage wise, you don't want to do too much that you're strapped to a rocket and you can't take anything in, but equally you don't want to do too low a dose so that it's like, you know, nice patterns and a few nice thoughts. You want to, you know, and you're going to be able to get to that conclusion when you've had relevant experience that tells you how much you need to do and where you need to do it.
Yeah, powerful. And the set, and we'll talk about the set and setting.
Set and setting, yeah.
The setting, the mindset, I think that's what that's alluding to, but the setting of where you're doing something. Again, back to not what you do, but how you do it, like how you in ceremony. Like, you could take so many things and place them in such an intentional space where the power of belief comes in, and it's like the mind is almost creating your landscape of like, right, I'm safe, I'm here, I'm landed, I've got everything I need, and overarching thing is I'm safe somewhere that is really
it's
like
the overarching thing. You're right. Yeah, it really is.
You just tune into that. But there's a documentary on Netflix called it's something about psychedelics, but it's all these celebrities, and I mean, although it's hilarious, and I have watched it a few times, I don't like it because it really it glorifies. It's like Eminem Purple Pills type, you know, comic and comedic, and it's all the celebrities talking about when they took LSD or when they took psychedelics, and it's weird that it's, you know, so it feels like such a mainstream documentary and so normalised. Yeah, you've got it wreaking havoc in people's lives. You know, people who are going out to try and experiment and express themselves with these things, and then they end up the other side of the law. And it's a real.
I mean, you're gonna, you know, if you're taking a powerful psychedelic, particularly something, I mean, LSD for me, I don't particularly like. It feels quite empty compared to mushrooms. Feel like there's someone else there. LSD just feels feels quite
analogy,
empty,
yeah,
and it goes on too long for me as well. I can't be sitting there for 12 hours like that without the interaction. So, but what I would say to your point on that is that there has to be the ultimate respect for the medicine, because if you go into expecting and it's surrender. It's like, I'm open to seeing whatever I need, and that's intention stepping into it. But there's an element of surrender, and if you don't surrender, you're going to get your ass kicked. To that point, if you're doing it because a celebrity's done it and it's now in the cultural context, it's cool. You're also opening yourself up to, think about your worst trauma that you've experienced in your life, the most psychological pain you've ever been in. Stepping back into that, because that's what happened. That's what happens, and that often happens, right? You revisit the most traumatic experience of your life and feel the emotions that you felt at the time it was happening. And I've seen people go through this. I've been through this. It's not cool. It's not something to do at a party. This is something to do when you really want to heal those parts of yourself. And there's going to be things that are so deep in the subconscious you can't remember that they happened, or maybe they didn't even happen in this lifetime. Because I've seen that happen as well, and I've had experiences similar to that, stuff that happened to me when I wasn't me, that I've relived, and I never would have expected to happen going into it. And there's so much of this we still don't understand. I love listening to like the old Terence McKenna talks and Ramda, and trying to, when they're trying to articulate and work out what on earth is actually going on. And this is why I think we need more conversations about it, because it's not spoken about. But I've seen things on DMT or on mushrooms that I have no comparable in this dimension to explain. And it's so interesting when you speak to other people, like, I had something similar to this, because what's going on? Like, none of us know. That's why I think we need to talk about it. And I think people are, because of the stigma around it, which is changing, but there's still a stigma around it. Because of the stigma, because of the legalities, etc., people don't talk about it. But because it's not spoken about, it's not normalised. And where it's not normalised, people don't feel that they can use it for all of the amazing benefits that are there. I'm trying to get my parents to be open to it at the moment.
Dip their toes in.
And they weren't. And then there was a BBC documentary on it. Oh, the BBC.
Oh, that's all you got to do with your parents. Just shove something on TV.
The BBC, okay. And this is part of the problem.
It's in the paper.
But that validates it, right?
It's
and
funny,
I think this is what a lot of the things that we experience at the moment is that our generation, the generations younger than us, because we've grown up getting our information from non-traditional sources, peer-to-peer information sharing, as opposed to state-controlled.
Yeah, we actually trust the opposite a bit more, don't
we? Exactly. And it highlights that as well, right? It's like we're actually more open, I think, to individuals commenting on events as opposed to a state-controlled, potentially funded media outlet. And the narrative will always be dictated in that way unless we can look beyond that. But I think, again, come back to our point about the internet earlier, why the internet's so amazing is that, particularly with now going into Internet 3.0 with things like blockchain and NFTs and all these other amazing stuff that's now happening, we then move the ledger one bit further. So it is now peer-to-peer controlled. We do now have more dominion over information and how it's shared and how we interact and work together. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant in loads of areas there.
I love that, and I'll pick up on one point. I wonder if that is generationally the trust, because it's relevant in my upbringing and family. There's a lack of trust is in worldwide, or like your neighbour or a stranger. There's a lack of trust there, and so my parents would go to the news to be reassured, or to give an information of who to trust and what to trust. But then with me, I'm like, I do trust the majority of people. You'd have to really do something questionable for me not to trust you. And I wonder if that individual, because I'm like, you haven't got an agenda apart from speaking the truth, or like just it's that shift in, like you touched upon, that shifting kind of information shared.
So, it's incredibly interesting. I think at this point we're quite polarized in generationally because the change has been so rapid. I liken it to becoming vegan, for example, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's.
We've not talked about it. We're halfway in.
So I went vegan eight years ago, and at that time, it still is the case now, although it's wider spread. But the people leading that shift to veganism were young millennials, Gen Z, I think it is, younger people, right? But I can empathise with my parents' position. Both my parents and I've been vegan for 4 years now. But the first couple of years, it was like I turned up at home as an alien. But I can empathise with it, because if you've been told from a young age, everyone that you trust, everyone that's taking care of you, school teachers, doctors, parents, family, this is how you live. And then think about roles in a family. Your son comes home and says, no, you've got it, all these people have got it wrong your whole life, you need to eat this. You're even if part of you resonates with it and you can take on board the information, there's another part of you that says, well, that's going against all of these authority figures that I've always trusted in my whole life.
As well.
And you identify with that diet, right? But I think over time, where it becomes normalised in culture, and you can walk down the street and you can see a vegan advert out of every major high street thing, it becomes accessible. And I think a lot of it with the vegan thing comes down to being comfortable enough in yourself to stand in your truth and be seen as who you are. Whereas I think in our culture, we've evolved by collaboration and through collaboration. And any time we're ostracised from a group, our survival is at risk. So our internal reward systems are geared towards collaboration. So if you do anything that puts you outside of that group, then you're at risk. So by me standing up and going, well, I'm now vegan, and everyone else is a meat eater, I then run the risk, unless I know myself, of being outside and I'm aware of how the brain works in this way, I'm at risk, right? So but now there's more people doing it. It's become more accessible. It's become more normal. It's more cool. Now it's a lot easier for that transition to happen. But it's a similar thing, I think, to the way that psychedelics have been now being positioned in our culture. That vegan for all those years was this kind of weird, misunderstood thing. You'll be malnourished. You miss out on this, and this. It's for these kinds of people. Now the narrative's spun. Now it's cool. Now the celebrity's doing it, whatever. And I think the same thing will be true of psychedelics.
If veganism was illegal, it would be so identical to drugs.
Yeah.
And to our psychedelics. It's fascinating that we've touched on these two topics because they're very similar in their cultural...
Two of my favourite things to talk about, don't worry.
Okay. But yeah, I'd say it's more of a natural progression in the conversation.
Yeah.
Because you're here. But yeah, it is fascinating. So where's veganism now for you? And have you over the 8 years? Because do you know what? When I went travelling, I'll briefly touch upon those. 2013, because people have heard it before. 2013, went travelling. My mind blew open. On my own solo journey. I ended up in Australia, lived on a farm. It was I guess it was in the outback. It was like 13,000 sheep. We're mustering sheep for a month. And then I was very close to the experience, right, living off the land. And then came back and I'm like, dropped back into this just complex system. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. What's going on? So I'm walking through supermarkets. I'm like freaking out. I'm actually having panic attacks of like, where's this coming from? Who do I trust? And I just started to, all right, I need to just go down to the foundation. So I cut everything out. And it was very, very alien for me to have no meat on my plate. But, and have all my friends looking at me in funny ways. But I was like, stuck true to my integrity, and I was like, look, this is an experiment for now, but I never ever called myself a vegan, because I didn't want to, because I do know what I feel I know. For me, what happens when I label myself, I get pigeonholed, you get also thrown into different categories. So that for me was one thing that I never did, but I'd always ask for the vegan menu. So it's like, I do associate with that somewhat. So that was my kind of way into it, and I really had to build myself back up. But I felt, better than ever for many years, and I'm experimenting with other stuff now. But again, still vegan. The plant-based diets is still at 99% of my diet. So it's strong there. But for you, did you ever dip back in with things on that?
No, I mean, I've not eaten an animal product since the day I went vegan. I did it overnight, and for me it was like a light bulb moment. It's an ethical position as much as it is a position on sustainability. and again, nothing's ever black and white. Yes, avocados are worse than locally raised lamb, for example.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not saying that it's how you'd say it, how it's applicable to all categories in that, in a sense of it being more sustainable. But for me, it's a position on sustainability, on ethics, and on health. I'm 90% whole food, plant based, which means that I only eat fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, beans, nuts, seeds, root vegetables, etc. Right. That being said, 10% of the time I work in hospitality. I will eat a vegan burger every now and again, but again, it comes down to balance. In terms of how I feel about the word vegan, I've gone in and out. I think part of coming to terms with myself and self-inquiry, it was, do I want to be seen as pigeonholed as this?
Sure.
Then I just started saying plant-based. But then if I look at it now, it's like, again, it's a position for me. It's a position that I can stand behind. I'm vegan. It's a practice. It's in the same way that I think Buddhism isn't a religion, it's a practice. Veganism for me is a practice.
Yeah, I love that.
And that's been a useful way to look at it and a way to talk about it. But I don't necessarily advocate for everyone to be a vegan. Like, you can talk about what's moral. Well, what's moral is different to every single person on this planet. So I don't say that you should do this or you should do this. I think,
and where you are as well.
Yeah.
If you were living in the mountains in Mongolia and you lived on a farm, I'm sure you'd take some milk.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? If you were in that setting, and that's what many people did to live and travel on the land, it's I guess your circumstance is massive in that.
Sure. And we can, you can delve into each. I mean, the categories of veganism essentially are health, animals, and sustainability, right? And you can look at the individual components to each. Like within health, for example, I try and eat food that's as close to its natural source or in its natural source. So, for example, heavily processed food, we can all agree isn't good for us. In the same way that...
Yeah, it's a bit of a truth, isn't it?
In the same way that if you have an option to have a nutritious meal that doesn't contain any animal products, and therefore nobody had to die for you to have that meal, ethically, my position is it makes more sense to eat that meal than the other. If you can buy something that's grown 10 miles away, and then as a restaurateur, we try and, for the most part, have seasonal food that's grown, picked, and delivered locally. We're going through, funnily enough, I've got a call on this tomorrow, but for Erpingham House, for that group of restaurants, we're going to be carbon negative and then beyond within the next 12 weeks. And when I looked at it, I'm like, wow, I've got, because again, I say that we're sustainable, we're vegan. And if I actually then took the time with this consultant that we've used to look into our supply chain in other areas, I'm like, well, can I stand behind, now I've identified this, can I stand behind this and say we're 100% sustainable? No. We're saying free from single-use plastic, etc., etc. But is there more we can do? Yes. So now we're going to go down this journey, and I think that to me was a reminder that we're all on our own journey, at our own stage, with our own influences and experiences and circumstances, and it's not to be too hard on ourselves, and so respectful of anyone's position, each their own. This is my position. If sharing it can help other people make a positive change, then great. If not, no worries. I think it's interesting culturally as well where we are at the moment, where it's like you can't have a difference of opinion to someone else and have a conversation without it being emotional. And I feel that's a weakness to me. Being so easily triggered and so easily offended is a sign. It's a sign of weakness. And I think we don't reach any kind of progress if we're not able to have dialogue. And it's possible for two people to have different opinions and both be right. This is another thing that's coming up a lot for me recently. It's like we so few people stand in their truth and say what they actually think because they're so worried about offending somebody else. Cancel culture. It's madness to me. It's absolute madness.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. But I think taking your approach and that that doors of perception, which you kind of tapped into there, that lens.
I love a Huxley reference.
It was the first book someone ever bought me, actually. Never got through it. It's very small as well.
Have you heard him talk, Aldous Huxley? You can actually on YouTube. There's a true psychonaut knowing this. There's a video. I think it's an audio recording of him on 2 tabs of acid talking to his wife and describing the experience. But he's so eloquent, so well spoken, and it's some great interviews of him. I'd highly recommend anyone watching Aldous Huxley for
12 hours just explaining the experience.
We don't have to listen for 12 hours, but you can listen to some of it.
Oh, amazing! Yeah. Why was I? But the lens in which you see the world. We all come from our own perception, our own biases, and if we all recognise that, even if you're not trying to tell people to see that, but just by being honest with yourself, like. And this last year, more so than ever, I've been trying to check in with my own bias and my own way in which I see the world. Because, you touched on, you've kind of gone back and forth with something, and I think that's so honest and human to do that. Like, we are always coming from our own perception based on our environments, our circumstances, and just to be honest with that gives other people permission to do that as well.
Just being comfortable with not knowing it all. And to be perceived by others as not knowing it all, right? It's like I remember being the person that if I didn't understand something, I wouldn't put my hand up and ask because I was scared of looking stupid. If I hadn't have achieved what I wanted to achieve, would I feel comfortable now putting my hand up and not knowing? No. But through that process of achieving what I wanted to achieve, I know my value. So that if I'm in a context where I don't understand something, I do not care. I will put my hand up and ask, sorry, I don't understand that. But it's taken me to build up my own self-esteem and self-confidence to be in that position. Yeah. But I do think so many of us, when we don't understand something, we're not willing to say, or we're not willing to be vulnerable in the sense of...
It's that shame again.
It's the shame. It's the shame coming up.
It's massive in our culture. And I bet, I'll take a guess, you were vulnerable putting your hand up in the education system, perhaps.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You're there to learn. It's like it's so mind-boggling because we all have that. We're like, I'm not going to look stupid in front of my friends because I don't know the answer. But you're there to find out the answer. It's mad. It's absolutely mad. And
even in a social context, I think a measure of your friendship group and a measure of your circle of people that you're around is that you can say anything to those people. It's like if you have friends that you cannot talk about your concerns over your finances, your concerns over your intimate relationships, your concerns over where you want to be and how happy you are. Maybe they're not the friends that you need around you, and I've changed and developed the people that are in my immediate circle to have people that I feel 100% comfortable with saying, I'm really going through it at the moment with this and this. And people that I can be seen in front of. But I think also as you develop, you're willing to be seen in front of more people, and people resonate with that degree of vulnerability. Like I can talk openly now and say, there's still times when I check myself and I'm like, I have a bit of like imposter syndrome, or do I actually deserve to be where I am, or I don't actually know how I'm going to get out. Like I have those moments. But I'm also willing to vocalize those moments as well. And that in itself is like a release.
It's a release, yeah.
It's a huge release.
Yeah.
But I think it's not always expected. Mm-hmm. But I think that's it. There's this real human element to that. And it's something that particularly as guys that we perhaps haven't been taught how to do or taught that it's okay to do. Mm-hmm. Because, we as much as things are in some aspects easier than they've ever been to live in the current time that we live in, we have got it so good contextually to other times in history, but we don't have that context. We didn't live in 1750, so we don't know how bad they had. We know we've got the information, but we weren't alive then. That being said, so we've got it super easy now in some regards, in terms of, for the most of us, we've got a roof over our heads, access to food, access to whatever we want on the click of a button, endless entertainment, connections with people all over the world. But on the flip side, it's never been more difficult. We've never had such a basis of comparison. We've never had so much choice. We've never had so many interactions. We've never had our emotions manipulated so many times in a day. Between you leaving your house and walking to the tube station, you've been advertised to 47 times.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Rather than having that one choice of t-shirts, or a jacket, you've got 20 coats in your wardrobe to choose. It's difficult.
Yeah.
There's so much decisions to make, and so many. It's not easy.
And we know so much.
And we know so much and feel so little.
There you go. Charlie Chaplin, right?
It's like again, it comes back to your point about the authority figures, right? Like, again, I'm sorry to go there, but I've just got to. This is me speaking openly. When the whole pandemic thing happened, I just ignored whatever I saw from other people. I'm like, what does this feel like? This didn't feel right. And I really went through it with people. I got a lot of, must have got shadow banned on Instagram about 50 times. I think my account's still restricted now. But I wasn't sharing anything that was particularly charged or triggering. I was questioning what was going on. And we live in a democracy, in supposedly the most advanced civilization in history. We should be able to question the mainstream narrative in a way that doesn't trigger people or offend people.
Or because those people in power do technically work for the people.
Exactly, but it didn't feel right, and it still doesn't feel right to me. Like if I you can talk about the data, but data is manipulated in 100 different ways. But if I talk about again, to quote Terence McKenna, the only thing we can rely upon is our personal experience, or our immediate experience, right? So if I look at my personal experience over the last 2 years, if I look at my gut feeling, which I'm fairly in tune with and developed,
You trust.
I trust implicitly, it doesn't feel right, and I will question when I don't see when things don't seem right to me. Not anyone necessarily. They won't, not with any aggression or any kind of anything from a hateful, but from a love, from a place of love. I'm like, what is going on? Well, I want to understand.
Yeah, when something doesn't feel right, you'll ask more questions. You won't just take it as truth.
And I'm open. I'm super open to and I found this to be such a good position to have, and I'm so grateful that I've learned this. I'm open to my perspective and my position on anything being changed at any time by anyone. Veganism. If I'm presented with an argument that goes the other way, cool. Guys, I've done what I've done the last 8 years. I now think this. In the same way that, when crypto came out, I was like, my immediate reaction was, sit down and have it.
Change.
I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, what this represents, like decentralized finance. Oh my God, yeah, I'm in. Same thing with like NFT. So all this stuff, but the COVID situation in particular, it wasn't that I was saying, my position wasn't, this doesn't exist, this is a scam, this is a hoax. It was, this doesn't feel right. I don't know entirely that the narrative that we're being fed is accurate or fair, and I don't believe that the conditions that I don't believe it's right to mandate. I don't think it's right to mandate
your health.
The health. I don't, and I still don't believe that's right. I think it comes down to choice. I'm not against vaccines. I'm not against lockdowns. I'm kind of against lockdowns. I'm definitely not against vaccines, but what I am against is
maybe lockdowns that say you can only leave the house once.
Right.
Just things like that. It's
yeah.
like, okay.
I think we should have choice and dominion over our own body, and I think then that falls back to our earlier point about responsibility. People don't want to take responsibility to their own health, so they outsource it to government. Yeah, you can say I went and got a vaccine. Cool, but have you done 10 hours of exercise this week and chosen to eat these foods instead of these foods? No, because that's harder work. It's easy to outsource your health to a vaccine. It's a quick fix.
Yeah, and most people, not figures again, but over 90% of people will be okay after this. And it's like, okay, if you've not changed anything, you're really worried about this, and that's okay. But if you haven't changed anything in your lifestyle that you do in those 24 hours, if you haven't changed anything or much, then there's a conversation to be had.
And I empathise with those people. Like, I've got huge empathy for people that were fearful. Like, I mean, like having fear and being immobilized by fear is a horrible place to be in, right?
Yeah.
If you were
it
literally
suppresses your immune system.
yeah,
and all the rest of
exactly.
it.
So imagine, you watch the news, you hear about this really terrible thing that's going on. You think about how it might impact you and your friends and your family, and you're fearful. And then someone comes on, oh, that's not true. Of course you're going to be triggered. I can empathise with that. Of course you are. And I really feel for those people, but it then makes it even more important that there are people question it, because it's not they're a lot of the time being fearful unnecessarily, because the news is useful to keep people in a state of fear, because through fear control is achieved, right? And it seems like we're in a position now where there's
history.
A huge amount.
Look at patterns of history.
Look to history, and this is when I have this, and again, and I found myself getting triggered at points on this when people are spouting, talking about communism and Marxism, and I'm like, guys, look at history. We don't change that much. The Second World War was within our grandparents' lifetime. Look at what was done. Look at what was done then. Look at communism before that, and since that. This isn't that long ago. We haven't changed that much. So as these things have been introduced, it's right for people to be able to question and
for people to be scared of that
yes.
over what's been fed. It's so normal. It should be normalised to be questioning things more.
The job of the news is to make the world's problems your problems, right? It's to take a problem that's happening that will never likely impact you. There was a bus crash in France. Well, why do I need to know that? Sat in London. Yeah. Is that why? Because it's clickbait and it's what people respond to. And this is one of the part of, about daily routine. I don't watch the news. I've got no need for that information. Yes, it's tragic. Do I need to know that? Does that affect me directly in my day-to-day experience? No. What is the point? Why have you taken on that information? And again, come back to consuming positive media. It's like that's not helpful. That time I allocated for 15 minutes listening to the news report on the radio, I could have 15 minutes podcast with something uplifting and powerful and helpful. And these changes done every day lead you in another direction.
Yeah, 1% rule. So those who watch the news are misinformed. No, sorry, what was it? Those who watch the news are... Those who don't watch the news are uninformed, but those who watch the news are misinformed. And when I kind of got that, I was like, okay.
But there's, and I think the great thing about things like podcasts is I love what Joe Rogan did with the ivermectin thing.
Yeah.
And it shows the power of individuals like Joe Rogan, where he went against the mainstream narrative. The news came after him, but his reach is bigger than most of the news stations combined. But it was honest reporting. It was him taking a number of different people, number of different opinions. His style is so super open. And he's just inquisitive.
And when I listen and I look to him, I feel okay.
Yeah.
I feel like, okay,
same.
Talk to me. But when
he's not reading off a script.
Exactly. It's bonkers. Back to what you said of how you feel. I always ask myself that. It's probably due to my partner. Like, she's always tuning into how she feels or how this feels in her body. If you tune into how this feels, not that your logical, rational mind is trying to figure out, it's how does this feel within me? Do I trust this person? Do I believe what they say? You will know. You've got so many powerful systems in your body which look out for that in other people, body language.
It's it's the Western thing of, if you can't quantify it, you can't identify it, quantify it, measure it, it doesn't exist. It's like, it has to be, it's a materialist reductionist approach, exactly, but there's so much to it. But in order to come back to your point about feeling it, in order to feel it, I believe you need to have a vessel that is tuned to feeling it, and the way you tune that vessel is by that work that you do on yourself, right? It's clearing out all the shit.
Tune in the old radio.
It's 100%. It's clearing, it's clearing that and being. It's like the book that I reread recently. I'm gonna
butcher the title.
Untethered Soul.
Okay, yeah.
Untethered Soul, and it's about becoming the observer.
Sure.
And we're so in there. We're so in this like meat suit, and we're so identified so closely with it that we're always the driver. We're always the one that we are the body, right? Whereas
we are the thoughts.
Yeah. Whereas if you can start to observe the thoughts, you can then be in a position more to feel what is being felt, as opposed to being the person that's doing the feeling, right? And that's been really helpful to me, to take that perspective, to say, take a step back in my mind, observe Loui? What is Loui feeling? And to almost like separate myself from the body in order to feel what the body is feeling. And this is such a useful thing because often, you know, we can try and rationalize things logically, but we just dig ourselves into an anxious hole. Because when we step back and observe and feel, it's like, oh, actually, it's just this, or it's this, or it's here, and it's this. And yeah, it's just...
Yeah, we try and solve the problem in which the same it was created with the mind.
Yeah.
All these problems are literally being created with the rational, logical, materialist, what we can see, what we can sense, those 5 sense doors that we can actually like, oh, that's the only thing. But this is, again, what psychedelics can do. They can make you question, okay, is this the only thing that's happening? Are these 5 senses the only ways in which I can perceive the world? No. Is it an answer?
What do you think about microdosing?
I have never microdosed in my life.
Okay.
But I think it can be a powerful tool. And I trust the people that talk about it. So, yeah.
It's been like a limitless pill for me.
Okay.
It's so Paul Stamets, you know Paul Stamets, yeah. Followed Paul Stamets' protocol.
Fantastic fun guy.
Yeah, but he has a protocol on how to stack microdose and a protocol on how to use it basically. And I started doing it a couple of years ago, and just I'm again through the self-inquiry that I've done, I know that my attention span is incredibly limited, an hour tops. I'm quite scatty. I'm a little bit unorganised.
What do you feel that is?
I don't know. It's just I want to get so much. I think I'm very driven, and I look forward a lot. So I have to really work on being present, and this is why meditation's been so helpful for me, because it really helps me to ground. You know, I'm quite airy.
Are you present in those, fleeting attention? Are you present within?
I am, but then I have to go and do something else, right? So what I found through microdosing is that I'm able to recognise that, and I'm able to sit for longer. My attention span's longer. I'm a little bit more organised. My little things like my ability to recall things, like just then with Untethered Soul. That before I'd be like sitting there for 5 minutes going, what was that? You know, and it's really helpful for that. And then physically, I do a lot of combat sport, jiu-jitsu, boxing. I like to run, etc. But in those combat sports where it's very reaction focused, I noticed that my reaction speeds are just that little bit quicker. It's super interesting. I listen to, and again, maybe I programmed that myself, and the belief is what. But I listened to. I can't remember.
Why not?
Why not?
Don't discount.
No, I'm not. No, I love it. But I listened to it was a podcast of it was a UFC fighter talking about it. He was talking about how he'd train on a low dose of mushrooms and just see punches coming before he'd normally see them, and it makes sense. You do feel that you feel more. You know, come back to the point about feeling. I definitely feel more now. If I have to sit with a feeling, it's easier.
And I'd put a lot of money on the people making this technology, which is allowing this to be recorded, have had psychedelic moments, or there's been, the people that are whoever produce your phones, drugs have played a part.
Definitely. Look, Steve Jobs, he was definitely on it. Look at the Beatles. Look at all their artwork, album covers. Look how they evolved from when they started to further on.
How can you deny that this is like a useful, powerful, creative, expressive tool? Like no one can, who's being honest.
No, and not unless you've gone to a festival, taken a load, had a horrible experience, and then you probably do want to discourage other people from doing them. But it's like those old stories that circulate. It's like, oh my friend's friend did that once and jumped out of a 10-story window, and these old stories that go around that scare people off. It doesn't happen.
No, they were used to make you laugh.
Yes.
Those moments.
But alcohol, fine. You want to go out and get drunk? Yeah. Fine. How many alcohol-related incidents are there per year? How many alcohol-related deaths are there per year? How many smoking-related deaths are there per year? Not only are they culturally sanctioned, they're culturally encouraged. They're pushed. Their reward systems are in place around them.
Within everything.
It's like all of it. Like it's a bedrock of society. Walk through any city centre and it's pubs and bars.
What do you think is stopping kind of a rethink on?
I think it's happening. I see it with young people now. I don't know how you. I'm 31. When I was 18, 19, 20, we went out 4 or 5 nights a week. I don't see 18, 19-year-olds doing that as much anymore. It doesn't seem that's the case. My peers. If I look around my friendship group, a lot of my friends don't drink anymore. Whereas my parents' generation, drinking was the norm. It's now quite normal to go out, and I don't drink.
Well, they say a pub closes, a club closes. That club culture is almost
it's done
on its knees.
We talk about this. I loved what you said earlier about intention behind stuff, and it's like, if I drink now, I rarely drink, but if I do,
Same,
I like red wine. I like to know where it's from, where it's grown. I like tasting it. That's a very intentional experience.
Yeah, I was thinking about this,
but it's not where I get drunk.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's like I enjoy that, and I have an intention behind it.
Yeah.
It's not, I need to forget this. It's not a coping mechanism, or it's not a way to have more confidence. It's an appreciation of what they and again.
You're in ceremony with your red wine.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I was thinking, I've got an audiobook club with a bunch of friends, and we had, it's called the Naked Mind book, all about alcoholism. Goes into it hard, and she talked about, then I started thinking about who would you say, and who do I know, if I ever come into contact with someone who has a really good relationship with alcohol, like who would that be? Like there's a scale, you've got toxic and sacred, and like toxic, sacred, okay, who's sacredly holding alcohol? And it would be someone who's a beer connoisseur, taster, wine taster, and what do they do? How do they come into contact with it? It's like, it's so sacred of an experience, like it's a felt experience, and it's never, if it goes, they know where the limit is and when it goes too much, and they'll easily bring back. And it's like that experience of someone that is over the bar serving, and they really care, and like they're almost it's like the dancer becomes the dance. It's like they're in that experience with the alcohol, and that is someone who has a great relationship with alcohol.
100%.
And it's just an interesting look into to see, what does a good relationship
comparing to alcohol to psychedelics again. It's like the alcohol, the slope to it being abused is very easily slid down, right? Very easily. Psychedelics, you take too much, you're not going to do it again. Or you visit too many times. It's you're it's almost like it's the opposite, right? It's the opposite effect, and it just seems crazy to me that when we're talking about words being insufficient to summarize a range of emotions or feelings or what you want to communicate. It's exactly the same for the label drugs, because the impact of psilocybin, cocaine, coffee, alcohol, they're all drugs in this category, but the impact and the effect and the use is completely different. I don't think it's helpful the way that they're categorized at the moment, and the various levels of demonization that go with them.
Drugs is just like saying food.
Food, yeah. Literally. Maybe that's a good thing to categorize as well, recategorize as well.
Food, yeah. Make sure you get your nutritious food. Yeah, man. Oh, I know you got a cut off here. Yeah, all good. But yeah, I don't know. Do you want to wrap up on anything? It's time to
tell me anything else.
Name 3 books.
3 books. All right, cool. 3 books. So I recently reread Alan Watts' autobiography, and I've always found it difficult to read Alan Watts for a long period of time, just because it's so like you have to be so in it. But his autobiography is amazing. I really, really enjoyed that book. Master Key System, Charles Hannell, Subconscious Conscious Mind.
Okay.
Read that when I was 19. It was like a life changer.
Easy read.
Yeah, it's written in sentences, like numbered sentences, and you read one chapter per week.
Oh, nice.
And then, do you know what I read? I do quite like a story as well. Shantaram.
Sure.
Great book.
Quarter of the way through.
Made me want to go to India.
Have you not been?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that book.
Yeah. Yeah, India's a special place. You'll love it, man. Is travel a big part of your...
It needs to be. I mean, I've neglected it because I've been so focused over the last 10 years on business and building companies, and I think that's something that I've neglected. I lived in New York for a year when I was younger. I lived in Mexico City for a year. But since then I've been so in it that certainly now I'm recognising that I was actually having this conversation with a friend yesterday that that's something that the pandemic's made me realise that, right, actually I need to travel more. So where creation comes from is a variety of experience, being able to link those experiences together.
Yeah.
But to have a variety of experience, I think you need to be exposed to different places, cultures, people, ideas, scenery, so
wisdom, perspective. It's a powerful dose. It's a powerful medicine, traveling the world. And something we should all do for sure. Should be a military service type.
100%.
Anyway, man. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, mate.
This has been
really
awesome.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, good. Right, let's wrap it up. Thanks,
cool.
Man.